It's not very often that you'll be handed that level of resource and time in your life. Apart from that, 4 or 5 years that you stay in IT, right? So make use of that opportunity as much as you could. Do not restrict yourself. Eventually, like in life, you will probably be the sum or some sort of average of the people around you. This is probably where at the early 90s or mid 90s period of Silicon Valley, which is where the big companies are going to get built up. It's never too late. If you think something is not working, just pivot from it or move on from it. It's not worth your time to try to save a sinking ship. Never start building a product before the problem is validated. With this company, Flowworks, I raised my first round of funding even before writing a single line of code. When Apple came up with smartphone, they had a unique take of how smartphones should be, which is, I think one of the key insights was to get rid of all the buttons and have very seamless sort of interaction with the phone. The highest risk factor is whether you have the clarity of vision as to how to solve the problem.
Today we have Sudipta with us. Sudipta is co-founder of Floworks, an AI-powered B2B automation platform designed to streamline sales tasks. He's an IIT Kharagpur graduate and also YC Combinator alum with over 6 years of experience in building AI products aimed at advancing human progress. Sudipta, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mihir, for having me. And I think you really put it nicely. And so happy to be here and, be of help to anyone who is listening to the show.
So what we'll do is we'll try to uncover your journey, right? And we'll take away few insights, few learning, and see how we can implement that in our life. Cool. So this is how we begin. We'll start with your early days, right? I know you went to IIT. It takes a lot of hard work when you're 17, 18. It takes a lot of hard work, a lot of patience to prepare for that exam. So tell us about your journey, right? About preparing for IIT JEE, and that how was your duration at IIT Kharagpur for 5 years, and then your first job at Goldman Sachs. So if you can walk us through your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And any learning that you want to share with us.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry.
So, okay, it's been probably very long. I think it was back in 2009, I guess, when I just passed my class 10th exam, and that's when I thought like let's give IIT exam or IIT JEE. It was called that time, right? Let's give that a crack. And obviously, it was lot difficult journey than I anticipated in the initial days. So I come actually from a very small town in West Bengal, right? So we do not have, I would say, that amount of infrastructures and everything to appear for JEE exams. I'm not sure if we have it right now, but that day we surely didn't have, right? But luckily at the time, like there were three retired professors from a very good college here who were actually giving this coaching of IIT JEE, right? And I happened to convince them to sort of coach me, and like the story began from there, right? So just to recap that, initial that 2 years is a lot of hard work, but what I realized is that in that time, if you really enjoy studying those topics of maths, physics, and chemistry, right, then it's also very fulfilling, right? Because these are things you're enjoying, and uh, i- i- if you're learning those things, then maybe cracking the exam would be a byproduct of that, right? If you're enjoying that process, right, then cracking the exam would be a byproduct of that. So I sort of approached it in that sense, right? For majority of my 2 years of preparation, I didn't think that okay, that would be either ITJ or nothing, right? But I sort of went along a journey of enjoying the process of learning those physics, maths, uh, chemistries, concepts, right? Obviously, I had my favorites there. Like specifically in chemistry, I actually loved organic chemistry a lot, right? Uh, then obviously I loved maths and the lot of concept in physics that I also loved, right? But essentially, I think the lesson I probably would be giving to people who are in that particular stage of life is to enjoy that process, right? It's not the end, and honestly, like looking back, it's not the end, and like ITJ or nothing. It's not that kind of scenario, right? even if you do not happen to go to
Uh-huh.
IIT, right? Life moves on, and you'll probably end up doing very well in your life if you are, if you have the right cause in your heart. But yeah, that's how
Great.
I think the 2 years went. 2 years went by pretty quickly. And
Mhm.
when I, entered IIT Kharagpur, and it was obviously, l- I was obviously overwhelmed, right? Like, I do not come from a metro city like Kolkata, right? Again, I mentioned it's a very small town, and from there to go into a setup like IIT is really overwhelming. But what I really found, right, in IIT is that there are a lot of people like me, right? It's not that, IIT is filled with people coming from metro cities. There are a lot of people from similar to my background, right? So that that was really comforting, right? You would not feel out of place, and that sort of, I think, helped me throughout my period at IIT, right? Um, and what IT really provides you is not just an academic environment, right? It also provides you with the freedom to pursue whatever you want to do. And that just not in canonical terms, that actually happens. For example, there are many people in my batch, right, that started their company in IT, right, while they're doing coursework,
Uh,
right? And IIT Kharagpur that time had probably the most flexible curriculum of all, right? I was in electronics, and I could actually take a minor in many other like departments as I would. I can in fact take courses without amounting to a minor, and that was really helpful, right? You have the liberty to sort of see where your passion really lies, right? And a
Quite.
lot of people actually tested entrepreneurship. I also sort of started something back in the college, right, and really enjoyed the process. But that's the freedom it gives, right? If you want to pursue research, there is good infrastructure, right? Like you can obviously go to research in abroad universities, right? You want to do good job in some sector, right? IT provides that. You want to pursue startups, right? Even that it provided. So there's a lot of flexibility, and like someone who is currently in IIT, my lesson would be make use of that opportunity, right? It's not very often that you'll be handed that level of resource and time, right, in your life, apart from that 4 or 5 years that you stay in IT, right? So make use of their opportunity as much as you could. Do not restrict yourself. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. Like, I'm only going to focus on this academics or less sports or something like that. Test as much as possible, and you eventually you'll find a passion.
Wow. Nice. So you answered by a lot of my follow-up questions, right? So I still have one question that uh, what is that in IIT that every second guy is a founder? I mean, like I've interviewed so many people and you guys are all from IIT. So tell us like what अभी एक हिंदी में कहावत है आई डोंट नो इफ माय इंग्लिश लिसनर्स वुड बी अंडरस्टैंडिंग दिस क्या है पानी में मतलब आईआईटी के पानी में क्या है सभी फाउंडर्स हैं
So, okay, not most of the IITians are founders, but yeah, most of the founders are probably IITians, right?
यस दैट्स अ राइट वे टू पुट इन
Um, I think, as I told, right, it gives you there are a couple of factors, right? Eventually, I think as a foundation stone, it gives you that freedom to test everything. Um, and I think probably even more important than that is eventually, like in life, you will probably be the sum or some sort of average of the people around you. Now, what happens in IIT is that there are, because there are a lot of alums from IIT who have built startups, run companies, right? You sort of have that access and that mentorship, right? Um, for example, today there are a
नाइस
lot of founders who I consider as my mentors. Happen to be either from my college, like seniors, even like people who are junior to me, right? But probably more experienced than me in company building and startups, right? I also take advice from them. So it gives you that, I would say, network, right? Better, I put it that way. The network where, like, for any problems, mentorship, any direction, right? You have that access to that knowledge, right? And what really happens in this
Mhm.
domain is that startup knowledge is really disorganized, right? There are no, like, you have courses for how to run business, we call it MBA. You have courses for how
Mhm.
to
Right.
build stuff, we call it engineering, right? You do not have courses for how to build
Mhm.
companies, right? In India.
Right. Right.
And as a result, like, it's not very formalized, it's not organized, and therefore you need to have access to this sort of private database of knowledge as much as possible in order to succeed. And that's what IT provides.
Right. More about the experiences, right? I mean, I believe you rightly put in there where you said that it's you become an average of 5 people, right? So I think everyone here, everyone at IIT basically, no, want to give that try to a startup. And even if you are not a startup guy, you will give a think of it. Let's try it once. Let's see how it is, right? Because that gives you that stage to fail and then learn from it.
That's
Right. Wonderful. Let's get into your story again. Uh, 5 years at IIT, right? What is next? Like you got your first job at Goldman Sachs, right? So how was the journey? I'm sure like a lot of people, those who are currently in IIT, would be listening to you. And so tell us what was the journey there and what did you learn? What do you learn at Goldman Sachs and what is that one thing that makes these companies special? If you can also
like
talk
companies
about
like
it.
Goldman Sachs. Got it. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So maybe I can talk about my journey to Goldman Sachs, right? Honestly, like, if I'm being very candid,
Mhm.
like, I was like confused like hell at fifth year, right? What should I do in career?
Okay.
I tried
Mhm.
different things. Like, I did research internships. I had my hand at some like startup building. Then, like, honestly, I would say I hadn't really found my true calling by then, right? And I think a lot of people would probably
Okay.
find themselves in that position. And I'd like to tell them it's natural, right?
Agreed.
And therefore, I sort of took the job of Goldman Sachs as more like a kind of stopgap solution, but more like it gave me certain time to think, what should I do
Mhm.
next, right? And also gave me time to evaluate if Goldman Sachs is the kind of job that I also want to do for a large chunk of my career going ahead. So that's
Got
how
it.
I landed in Goldman Sachs. Part of the reasons I chose the job is because I loved maths and I love statistics. Coming from electronics background, those are the things I've been trained on. And I thought like a job in an investment bank would
Mhm.
sort of uh, give me opportunity to use and utilize the skills to my advantage. Uh,
Wow.
that's
Nice.
what really happened. And then, okay, so coming to your question, like Goldman Sachs, I believe is one of the great companies out there in the world, right? Um,
Mhm. Right.
I think that especially during that time, it was probably, you know, equivalent to, let's say, getting a job at Google, right? Uh, People would, sort of that would probably be, top one or two, top two, sort of uh,
Right.
at their mind
Right.
when they apply
Right.
for the job. So what actually, to answer your question,
Mhm.
what made these companies like, let's say, Goldman Sachs or Google special is that uh, it's very performance driven culture, right? And they really
Mhm.
do take care of their employees really well, right? Uh,
Okay.
Having said that, obviously there are certain deficiencies with these larger companies, and I think that's there for many other
Mhm.
companies. Uh, but if you really want to pursue a career in finance, right? I think Goldman Sachs is really a good
Mhm.
company to start with, right?
Okay. Great. Great. So now moving back to your journey and a bit in detail, right? So for the 5th year, like you moved to Goldman Sachs, right? Now, what triggered you to start your first company there? If I read it clearly, after Goldman Sachs, you started a company, AI and based startup that was like
Right.
Umpire's View, if I'm putting it rightly. So connecting the dots here, what triggered you to start your own company?
Okay. Again, as I mentioned, you are probably an average of 5 people around you. So Goldman Sachs job was at Bangalore,
Right.
and if you remember 2015 and 2016, Bangalore, it was the stepping stone of all the very big startups that you see today. There's
Hmm.
a
Right.
then there are a lot of
An academy
Beef,
started back
Bay.
then. Right.
All these companies really started back then, right? That was a period,
Right.
and I think that environment really got to me, right? obviously, as I
Mm.
told, I also tried being a startup at college, and somewhere down in my mind and heart, it was always there. But that environment at Bangalore really got me, right? And I thought, like, this is probably, we're at the early 90s or mid 90s period of Silicon Valley, which is where the big
Right.
companies are going to get built up, right? And this would be
Mm.
really a great time to start a startup, right?
Great. Great. I will also touch upon. Sorry to cut you.
Oh,
Please,
yeah,
please go.
that is
Please
the
go ahead.
answer.
Okay. So just want to touch upon the
Mm.
emotional aspect of it. Now, you had a good job, right? So in India, most of the people are coming from, let's say, either lower middle class family or middle class family, right? I mean, I have no idea about your background, but that's how the statistics says, right? Now, you have got a good job, right? You studied at IIT, right? The dream college. You got a good company, right? Now, did you ever had in your mind that, no, what if I feel if I move to startup, right? That fear aspect of it, that risk taking appetite, how did that came in?
Right. So okay, I actually come from a very humble background, right? And for me,
Mhm.
it was difficult in some sense, right? But I think there was a framework that I followed that time, and which really helped me. And the
Okay.
framework was
Mhm.
like, even if I fail in my startup, right, it is at most going to peg me
Mhm.
back by, let's say, 2 years, right? I can always go into the job market
Mm.
and find a job. If I was good enough to crack Goldman Sachs
Right.
in 2016, I should be
Mm.
good enough to crack similar companies in 2018, 2019, right? At most, at most, it's going to peg
Mm.
me back by 2 years. But if I don't jump and test
Right.
the startup journey now, it might take me back by half my lifetime, because moments like this do not
Mm.
come very often. That really cleared up my
Interesting.
mind.
Mm. So basically, this is how our mind works, right? No, it looks for evidence in the past. So you cracked the IITJ, so you had that evidence that, no, I can tackle this difficult exam. You went into IIT, you did good in your academics, so you had that now evidence in your mind that, no, I did well in academics. You went into Goldman Sachs, so there was a series of event that happened in your life where you did
Yes,
well, and now that kind of triggered in your mind saying that, okay, even if I move to startup, what worse is going to happen, right? I'm still going to be better because I did those events in the past and I came out
that's right.
successfully.
I think
Wonderful.
that's a
Nice.
nice way to
Nice.
put it, right?
Yeah. Great. Great. So I mean, coming back to your journey again, and so I mean, Goldman Sachs happened. Now, first company was Umpire's View, right? So I saw that. I was reading your post, LinkedIn post, where you described it beautifully, but this is for our audience, right? So what went wrong there? uh, First of all, let's not go to the results. I want to understand the process first, right? How did the ideation came in, right? How did you implement, let's say, how did you check the product market fit if you did, and what happened in the end? So if you can guide us through the entire journey.
Right. Right. So this is when this is before I left the job at Goldman Sachs, right? I and my co-founder, like,
Oh,
we're
okay.
sort of ideating
Okay.
what really we should do next, right? What kind of idea we should work
Hmm.
on. And we eventually tried 3, 4 other ideas before stumbling onto it. And the logic behind starting with this idea was that, like, I obviously loved cricket, uh, and there are certain issues as to how the games were sort of officiated that really pained me. And I thought this should
Hmm.
be a good market, because this is where I can leverage my expertise, which is, let's say, that time in AI and statistics, and then utilize that to solve a problem which I personally felt the pain with, right, as a cricket lover.
Hmm.
And I thought, that probably is a very good idea to start on, right? But eventually, about a year and a half in the startup, I realized that, we missed many critical steps as to what are the things that need to follow
Hmm.
to build a big business.
Can you mention those steps, please, for
Yeah.
our
So,
audience? I really want to understand like what
right,
went
right.
wrong.
So again, being a first time founder, I thought that if I build a good product, customers would come, right?
Hmm.
Again, obviously,
Hmm.
you must have heard of that. Like, that's how it do not happen. Right? It doesn't happen that way.
Hmm.
Uh,
Right.
do need to do proper market research. You do need to not just
Hmm.
market research. You have to validate the pain point. You have to validate who the buyer of the product would be, right? Many cases, there are
Right.
problems that are abound around us, but probably no one would pay you to solve those problems. In that case, solving that
Hmm.
problem would be a good, business. I say business, but good thing for an NGO to do, but not a good thing for a business to do or pursue. So you have to find like there is a
Hmm.
valid problem, but there is all a large chunk of people who are willing to pay for that, right? So that is what we call like problem validations space.
Right.
I would say I
Right.
didn't do that very well in the start, right?
Hmm.
I straight away
Okay.
went into building the product, which really backfired because it eats up your time and it eats up your what do I
Hmm.
say runway. And after a
Right.
year of building the product, I realized the market needs something really different, right?
Hmm.
So that I think that is probably the first mistake and probably the biggest mistake till date. Also, I didn't value I would say the importance of talking with customers a lot, or let's say networking with customers a lot, right? And that really
Hmm.
backfired again because at the end of the day, if you're building a product for your customers, you have to understand their psyche. How do they think, right? What is it that keeps
Hmm.
them at night, right? Many times the problems that are visible to us are probably not the problem that keeps us at night. Uh, there are deeper level problems
Hmm.
that you need to solve, right? Again, at that problem discovery phase, again, we faltered. Eventually, that took us long time to correct, and we ran out of money to sort of sustain the company.
Hmm.
And I think one thing we did really well is to move on from that quickly instead of pursuing it long. That's something I would advise everyone starting a startup, right? It's never too late. If you think something is not working, just pivot from it, or like move on from it. It's not worth your time to
Queens.
sort of try to save a sinking ship. At the end of
Hmm.
the day, you are giving the precious time of your life to that. So make sure it is
Right.
worth that,
Right.
and not
Hmm.
because you have invested 2 years of your life, that should not warrant you to invest another year of your life into.
No, there you go. Awesome. So now moving further, right? So this you decide to shut this business. Okay. Just to summarize for everyone, there was a the market research missing. You did not speak to the customers probably, right? And you did not understand who the right the buyer of the product is, right? And you build the product before identifying the market. So cool. Now moving to the next startup, right? That is Flowwork. So connect the dot here, like all these failures, all these that you learned from your failures, how did you connect those to the current company that you are in, the company you have started, like Flowwork? So I mean, the market fit, if you can connect those, no, because I really want to know that, no, how learning had happened to you, and how did you implement those learning to make your current startup successful?
Right. Okay. Just a disclaimer, it's not yet successful in that sense, but yeah. All right. So great question. So after I left Umpire's View, I thought like less. Also, personally, I also faced certain financial hardship. So I did a job at Clear Tax. I was managing their small and medium enterprise product, right? Which was a GST filing product that came just now, right? Just then. Um,
Hmm.
and it so happened that I definitely learned a lot from the founders of ClearTax, working closely with them, how to really think about productizing something, how to really think about product requirements, right? That is a very good, I would say, learning curve for me. And when coming to Flowworks, I thought like let's put all the learnings at first, right? And the number one learning was that never
Mhm.
start building a product before the problem is validated, right? Uh, so with this
Nice.
company, Flowworks, I raised my first round of funding even before writing a single line of code. Right? It was purely, I,
Nice.
and that was, and I think that's something everyone should do. Right? If you are not able to convince an investor with your idea, with your vision, and with how you want to solve the problem, right? Then they are not going to get convinced by seeing 1,000 lines of codes that you have written. Because at
Hmm.
the end of the day, you know, the daily scheme that you need to do when you are building a startup is not building a product or tech, right? In most cases, uh,
Hmm.
because that is something in today's day and age can be achieved with high degree of determinism. You can actually code up certain things. Maybe it can take, for some it can take 2 months, for some it can take 6 months, but it can be done. But probably the bigger
Hmm.
de-risking you need to do, not just for your investors, but even for you, is to see if there's a market for the problem that you're solving, right? If you want the right person to
Hmm.
solve the problem, right? If you feel passionate about that, right? If you are willing to spend next 10 years of life solving that problem or adjacent problem, these are the de-risking you need to do
Hmm.
even before you start writing your first line of code. And so
Got it.
basically, all my experience and it's learning from the last 3-4 years helped me reach this conclusion. And I also made sure that this time I keep myself surrounded with some very good mentors who have very good companies, right? And some of them are also mentors to me even till date. But I think this is
Wonderful.
probably how it began.
Awesome. So you implemented all your past mistakes and you corrected it nicely to kind of get the current startup from 0 to 1. Great, great. So we'll come to the technical part of it, like behind the product. Uh, let's talk about the YC because a lot of people are very excited in
And
India, right? Especially the young people, those who are trying to build something out of the college. Uh, they are very excited to apply to YC because we see that Razorpay and then Zepto, they all are like big companies in India as well that came out of YC, and kind of YC is a legendary now, right? We all know even I follow a few of
actually,
their founders like partners on LinkedIn. So one question here, like how did YC happen to you? When did you apply, and if there's any criteria to apply, if you can also talk on that.
right. So honestly, there is no stage to apply for YC. I think there is a common misconception that you have to have products or you have to have early revenues to apply for YC. It's nothing like that.
Uh-huh.
In our
Uh-huh.
batch, and in fact, this has been validated by some of the group partners when we were in the batch. In our batch, we had 40% of the companies that came at idea stage. Right.
Hmm.
Uh, so therefore, no time is early for you to apply to IC. You, you can be in college, you
Okay.
can be just out of college, you can be in a job still, you can still apply for IC, right?
Uh-huh.
Now, what you really need in YC is a clarity of thought of what you are going to build, right? You cannot, co-
Hmm.
you cannot be successful in getting to YC and in general in building a startups by analogy. So if you see a successful company in certain space, you cannot just, start writing a YC application by seeing seeing that company and writing it, right? Why? The reason it doesn't work because, you're just copying someone, but you are not able to copy their insight and their vision as to why they start the company, and that will reflect in the application,
Hmm.
right? You'll probably only be able to write some things which are um, available to commonize, right? But lot of the time, when founders build a startup, is because they have some type of unique insight about that problem. That's not very apparent to commonize, right? That's not very
Okay.
intuitive to commonize, right? And that is something YC
Hmm.
is really looking at. And in fact, that is something you should also, try to question yourself.
Right.
If you are, when you are starting a company, right? Because unless you
Uh-huh.
have a very unique take on that problem, which in most cases should be contrarian to, let's say, how a lot of people think about solving the problem, then you'll likely not be a good big company. For example, let's say uh, you know, when Google started, for example, right? They had a contrarian view of
Hmm.
how pages should rank or appear in web, right? Which was very different from how, let's say,
Got it.
Yahoo did that time, right? So they introduced this page rank algorithm. Many people thought it was crazy at the time,
Hmm.
but they were, Sergi and Larry were the two people who thought like, that is something which is going to change search, and that's why they succeeded. It's not that before
Hmm.
them there are no search engines. There were successful search engines running that time, Yahoo and AOL, and these kind of companies. Similarly, I think for Facebook, right? Zuckerberg definitely had some sort of unique insight about how to run a social media account. At least because prior to that,
Hmm.
Orkut was there, and probably a few other examples were there. When Apple came up with
Yes.
smartphone, they had a unique take of how smartphones should be, which is, I think, one of the key insight was to get rid of all the buttons and have very seamless sort of interaction with the phone. So you have to have
Got it.
this deeper level of insight of why your approach to solving that
Hmm.
problem is unique, counterintuitive, and why you are well positioned to win in the market. Right.
Hmm.
The
Basically,
way,
clarity of thoughts,
right?
right? I
Or
mean,
at
clarity,
a very deeper level, right? And that's,
deeper level.
I think,
Got it.
if you ask me what's the number one thing YC looks for, this is what they look for, right? They do not look for whether you're a
Hmm.
product or anything, right? Obviously, if you have a good background and if you have good evidence, let's say you have worked in good company at good position, they will know you have the capability to build a product, right? That's not the most, I would say, the highest risk factor in that assessment. The highest risk factor is whether
Hmm.
you have the clarity of vision as to how to solve the problem.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Thank you for that insight. I'm sure a lot of people would pick a lot of insights from this. Uh, Moving forward a bit, I know you must have had a lot of experiences there in YC for sure. So, just to have one concluding point here, like, what is that one thing you believe was the one great thing that you picked from YC that helped in your business? I mean, if you can help us with that.
Right. I think it's hard to single out one. There are a lot of
Mhm.
points. Um,
We won't mind having few.
right. Um, so like, well, when we were in the batch, what YC really forces us to do is to validate the problem statement. We have seen companies that go into YC
Hmm.
with the revenues and some level of, as they claim, had product market fit, but then within the batch they would pivot to
Hmm.
completely different ideas and different problem statement. Uh,
Got it.
I think how to validate the mental framework of validating a problem statement is something YC
Mhm.
partners are really good at. That personally helped my company because I'd say when we went into YC, we are sort of building a SaaS product for Indian market, which was like very briefly, it was a CRM, um, connected CRM that can get your data from WhatsApp and other uh, chat-based platforms and organize them in a way so that you can
Hmm.
run your business efficiently on through WhatsApp, through
Got
messengers,
it.
right? But again, in YC, we did a lot of market research and we found while this is a worthwhile problem to solve, the payability is not there, specifically in the market for SaaS products. We pivoted to a slightly different problem, but focused majorly on the North American markets to begin with. Right. So YC gives you this mental frameworks of how to validate your problem,
Hmm.
and they are very honest about their feedback. They would not sugarcoat feedback. Okay, you have been doing good. Like if you're not doing well, they would be very upfront, and that ultimately helps you.
Wonderful. Because I
Uh,
believe, uh, sorry to cut you here, just to add on, because I believe that now the critical feedback in the beginning, I think that is something that saves the startup, right?
okay.
Because,
This saves you 6 months of time.
yeah,
Right.
absolutely, absolutely, for sure.
You'll
Sorry to cut
eventually
you, please continue.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, you'll eventually, discover that yourselves, but you will be wasting 6 months of your runway in doing that.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that expert advice really has. And the second most thing that helped me personally in YC is the network, right?
Wonderful.
Both in the batch as well as in the alum network, there are a lot of people you can reach out for help.
Hmm.
There are a lot of companies that you can reach out to be your first beta customers,
Hmm.
and they're really helpful. In fact, we got a large chunk of initial customers from within the YC network itself.
Nice.
would
That
be
is very
willing to
fast.
spend, yeah, they'd be willing to spend time with you, sort of ideate with you, give feedback at a much deeper level than, let's say, another 10 partners in the initial days.
Wow.
Mm. Yeah, I think these two would be the top two takeaways
Great, great.
that
Awesome.
that
So
really welcome.
nice, nice. I believe they give you everything to push your startup to at least 0 to 1 for sure. Because if you have early customers, if you have early adopters, I think that is wonderful. I mean, you build the
Right.
product, you have early adopter that is ready to give you the feedback. I think, I mean, nothing. At least I can think of that could be better than this. Great, awesome. So, just one question. This could be a general question, right? Because I keep reading articles, and just out of curiosity, that I see that like 99% of the startup that gets accepted in YC is AI enabled in some way, right? So,
Mhm.
do you think this is like kind of a prerequisite or blueprint to get into YC?
I don't. Okay, I don't think this is like, if you're
I
building
mean,
a startup,
one
you
of
should
the.
think this line, right?
Mhm.
Like 100%, this is not the criteria a YC partner would have in their mind that
Got it.
you have to be AI enabled to do this, right? At the end of the day, you are solving a problem for your customers, right?
Got it.
That is the number one criteria, right? Whether you are solving a valid problem for a large chunk of people, right?
Mhm.
That's the number one criteria. Whether you are AI enabled or not, you know, YC doesn't really care, honestly.
Got it.
Now, I think over the last 1 or 2 years, we are probably seeing this trend because AI. I would say AI, but specifically LLM, has been that sort of a revolution,
Hmm.
right? And the application is so, I would say, generalized that it can be applied to many different business use cases, which were not previously getting solved through, let's say, normal software approaches.
Got it.
That's the reason we are seeing a lot of companies adopting LLMs to solve critical business problems which remained unsolved in the last 10 years.
Hmm.
And I think that's probably the reason we are seeing probably 95% of the companies using some sort of AI or LLM in
Got
their
it.
in their product building. But
Got it.
that's definitely not the number one criteria.
Perfect. Understood. Thank you for that answer. Uh, Getting back to your product, okay, just to understand what Flowworks does, and any business owner who is watching this podcast possibly can take away some feedback, but some learning for sure, and understanding of your product, what actually does. So it's an AI enabled CRM. That's what I understand, right? So what I believe is like generative AI and like machine learning algorithm. The main purpose here is to give you personalized experiences, right? So when
Mhm.
you kind of sell your product to, let's say, a company, right? So how
Mhm.
you make sure that they get a personalized experiences?
Okay, so just to correct you, it's not an AI-enabled CRM, right?
Mhm.
What Flowers is building, we're building AI, sort of AI employees, as we call it, right? So
Got
think of this like an AI agent that can perform a specific business task in your organization really well and do
it.
it at a much higher scale than a human would be able to do. For example, our current flagship product, which is AI SDR. So
Mhm.
SDR stands for Sales Development Rep, right? So this is an AI agent that can perform the task of a human SDR, right? Probably the best version of human SDR,
Mhm.
but at a scale which is 12 to 15 times than a human SDR, right?
Got
Now, what do you really mean by this, right? Now, are you really sort of eating the job of a human SDR? Uh, Honestly, no, right? Think of it in this way. So when industrial revolution happened,
Mhm.
uh, machines came and that really elevated the productivity of humans, right?
Humans, right?
Uh, when An even more contemporary example would be, let's say, uh, when AWS came, right? Before
Mhm.
that, productionizing any app would be very tedious, right? You have to maintain servers, you have to maintain deployment, you have to maintain the pipeline and everything, right? But
Agreed.
after that, right, would you say AWS had eaten up the job of DevOps engineer? No, right?
No.
What it did, it probably uh, give more power to software engineers so that they
Right.
can focus more on creative aspects of software engineering, like
Mm.
building algorithms and writing code, rather than spending tedious time in basically productionizing their tools, which are sort of repetitive and mundane in nature, right? So what AISJ does is that it streamlines and it performs all the tedious and monotonic part of sales development,
Mhm.
and it does it so well that it can probably do the task of 10, 12, or 15 SDRs all at once.
Got it. Got it.
If you have business looking to scale, right, our
Mm.
product can be useful. You can deploy it and you can empower your existing SDRs with this tool, and they will be giving you 12 to 15 times more meetings per month, per week, per year going
Wow.
forward.
Nice.
Right. That's
Nice.
basically that.
Wonderful. So I'll leave the detailed part to anyone who is watching. You can comment into the video. Possibly, I'll ask Sudipta to come back and kind of respond into it. So, just one question. This is completely out of curiosity. Like, what is the KPI for success for you here and in Flowworks? How do you see your product being successful?
It's actually very simple in our case, right?
Mhm.
Think of how you how would you call your sales process being successful? At the end of the day, if you're a B2B business, right,
Mhm.
then you'll probably look at how many customers you're being able
Right.
to sell, right?
Right.
Uh, a metric lower than that would be, let's say, how many meetings you're booking, right? A metric
Hmm.
lower than that would be how many people you are able to successfully engage in conversation with. A metric lower than that would be how many people you are effectively able to reach out, interested
Got it.
people, high intent people you are able to reach out, right? So these are
Hmm.
the various metrics. You generally gauge your sales process, or you generally, gauge your salesperson against,
Got it.
right?
Got it.
Our product is, gauged in the same metrics.
Hmm.
Our AISDR will be gauged against how many high intent people it can effectively reach out to based on their LinkedIn activity, web activity, everything. And ultimately to the point of how many qualified sales call it can actually book for you. Right.
Got it.
So it's pretty simple for us in that sense.
Hmm.
Uh, I think a lot of companies really struggle to find these metrics, right?
Mhm.
And it's really important that you zero onto these performance metrics that your product should be gauged on, right?
Right.
And do not look for vanity metrics that would satisfy your ego, let's say. For
Hmm.
example, in our space, right, there are a few companies that promise uh, delivering a large number of, let's say, customers that they can reach out to with that tool. Right. But ultimately, what really matters to businesses is how many customers you're able to convert for them, how many meetings are you able to book for them. Just
Got it.
reaching out, playing, painting to a very large number of customers won't really make any difference. You actually have
Hmm.
to have to convert them, right? And that's basically the metrics we are internally sort of stressing and testing our product against.
Amazing. So you found your product market fit, and now you're like up and running. Amazing. Great. So just a conclusion part of it, like where do you see AI coming forward, like in the next 5 years? Just a general, no, dissecting from your journey and an idea about the AI, because even I want to see it, like where, because kind of the crazy development it is happening. Because I was interviewing uh, a director of uh, Tiger Analytics, and he told me that they are building LLM model which is going to be crazy into and releasing in 2028. Right. So I want to understand your viewpoint. Where do you see AI going forward in 5 years?
Right. So this is my view, right? And based on historically what I have seen,
Mhm.
uh, initially, like probably about 8 to 10 years back, we were using AI to do a lot of analysis tasks, right?
Got it.
Let's say sentiment analysis, then
Hmm.
some sort of image detection,
Right.
like these kind of tasks, right? Analysis where the end like the output would be some level of I would say label or classification input, right?
Right.
Now, what the age that we are in today, AI is being used in generation tasks or creative
Hmm.
tasks more, right?
Hmm.
It can write various things or communication for you. It can write email copies. It can, reply to customer support. requests and stuff. Like it has become a lot more creative than it was before. It was more analytical. Now it's more creative. I think the next step would be more focused towards being reasoning uh, and probably a combination of analytics and creative, right? Now, what is reasoning? And reasoning is basically the ability of AI to break a large chunk of, given an objective function, it should be able to complete that, right? By breaking it down to certain tasks, prioritizing it, maybe delegating among various other AIs, right? And get ultimately getting the task done. And the reason reasoning is important uh, problem, I think, is because that is something which will unlock the next level of productivity for us, right? Ultimately, I think the way technology gets developed is we try to increase the intelligence of the technology to sort of asymptotically reach human intelligence, right? And reasoning is probably, I think, will be the next steps in that journey. Uh, and in what time we'll reach there, my belief is there probably will reach much sooner than we would expect. Right? Yeah.
Got it. Got it. Just one question. Like, do you think this is because since uh, reasoning is the next step, right? And even as you was saying about this, I was reading the article by CTO of OpenAI, and I think she resigned recently. She was also mentioning about reasoning being the next capability of generative AI, right? So, do you think that this is good for human ages, not in terms of jobs, but in terms of reasoning capability? Because I believe our entire education system has been modeled around creating that reasoning ability for us, right? And now, since the AI is doing that for us, will that reduce the reasoning capability of human? What do you think? Just a general question. What your perspective?
Um, See, if history is the evidence with that, right? It's not going to lower our intelligence or reasoning capability. Right? If you really see again, if I go back to, let's say, the start of technological revolution, which is, let's say, the industrial revolution age, right? When machines came, right, what it did, it didn't make us lazy, right? It actually sort of increased the perimeter of our thinking, right? That time we were focused on, okay, these are the few set of things we can make, but with machines we can make these many different other things, right?
Right.
I think when reasoning capability comes in AI, um, the kind of problem we have been, let's say, not been able to solve till date, I think humans should be able to solve them, right? I think there are a lot of high value problems in this domain. For example, let's say I think you would know there are a lot of problems in with respect to protein folding and biochemistry that are unsolved today because of, I think, number one is obviously of compute, but also uh, we do not have an, I would say, mathematical formula or AI model that knows how to really break down that complex problem into multiple steps and solve them sequentially, right?
Got it.
And so basically, my point being, the amount of problem that have remained unsolved probably for very long will now be solved with that kind of AI or that kind of technology at hand.
Got it. Got it. Perfect. So we're end of our conversation. Like just one unfiltered advice that you can give to our viewers. Our viewers are like early career professional, young entrepreneurs. So if you can give us one unfiltered advice that you received from your mentor and that is helping you through.
Well, Hmm. Okay, so I think this is not my advice. This is something, um, again, not any of my mentors, but I think I heard there's one of the quotes of Jeff Bezos, right?
Uh-huh.
You should follow the principle of regret minimization in your life. You
Hmm.
should always do things that would minimize the amount of regret you might have when you are 70 years old.
Got it. Nice. Nice. Wonderful. That's amazing advice. I mean, to follow your passion, to do something that you love and possibly kind of explore
Right.
life in some way.
Looking back, when you were 70 years old, looking back, you shouldn't have the feeling, okay, I should have tried that
Hmm.
when I was 30 years, 20 years. Right.
Got it.
You shouldn't have that.
Got it. Amazing. Thank you so much for that conversation. It was amazing talking to you. And I'm sure a lot of people is going to put a lot of insights out of this conversation and take notes possibly. So, I mean, thank you again.
Okay, thank you, Maze, for having me. And I really enjoyed this conversation, and hopefully your viewers find this useful.
Amazing. Thank you.
Right.
Great.